"You are just a contract," he whispered on their wedding night years later. He begged her back. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us go back to the night when everything began, the night our main characters signed away their hearts without even knowing it. The rain outside the penthouse window fell in sharp streaks, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. Inside, the air was thick with silence. Marcus Hale, the 34-year-old CEO of Hale Industries, stood behind his desk, his expression carved from stone. On the polished surface between him and the woman, standing across from him, lay a single document, 6 pages, 2 signatures, 1 deal. "Marry me," he said flatly. "Think of it as a contract." The woman across from him, Clara Evans, blinked in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she looked at the typed words that would change her life. She was his executive assistant, overworked, underpaid, and cornered by life. Her father's medical bills were past due. The hospital had already sent 2 warnings. "This is not a joke, is it?" she whispered. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes cold. "You need money. I need a wife for the board to approve the merger. It is business, Clara. Nothing more." A flash of pain crossed her face, but she swallowed it. "And if I refuse," he slid the pen toward her. "Then you walk out, and your father's treatment stops tomorrow." The hum of the city outside grew distant. The world shrank to that desk, that paper, that pen. Clara's breath hitched as she reached out, her voice barely audible. "What are the terms? No emotions, no interference in my personal life. When the contract expires in 12 months, we part ways. Cleanly." Her pen hovered, then touched the paper. 1 signature later, her freedom vanished. That night, under the flash of cameras and the shimmer of champagne, they were declared husband and wife. The tabloids called it the wedding of the year. But inside the lavish ballroom, Clara felt like an actress reading lines she never agreed to perform. When the guests left and the music faded, the penthouse turned cold again. She stood by the window, still in her wedding gown, staring at the city lights below. Marcus entered the room quietly, his tuxedo jacket slung over his shoulder. For a brief moment, she thought he might say something kind, something human. Instead, he stopped behind her and said in a low voice, "Do not fool yourself, Clara. You are just a contract." The words landed like ice water. She turned slowly, her eyes glistening but proud. "Understood," she said. "I will play my part." He nodded once, as if sealing another business deal, and walked away. When the door closed, she finally let the tears fall. The pearls from her hair scattered across the marble floor, tiny echoes of everything she was losing. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and inside, a new silence settled, the kind that only lives between 2 strangers, forced to share one life. What neither of them knew was that this cold beginning would someday burn into something neither contract nor logic could contain. But for now, their story began not with love, but with a signature. The morning after the wedding was quieter than any morning Clara had ever known. The sun rose over the New York skyline, spilling pale light into the penthouse that no longer felt like hers or anyone's. The echo of last night's words still clung to the air. "You are just a contract." They replayed in her head as she sat alone at the long dining table, untouched breakfast cooling in front of her. Marcus was already gone. Of course he was. His schedule had been emailed to her before dawn by his assistant, as if nothing extraordinary had happened, as if they had not just signed a marriage license that felt more like a corporate deal. The silence around her was suffocating. The penthouse looked like it belonged in a magazine, steel glass and marble, but it had no warmth. Every inch of it screamed temporary. Clara took a slow sip of coffee that had gone bitter. A voice in her head whispered, "You agreed to this." Her father's voice followed, faint and gentle from memory. "You do what you must, sweetheart. Sometimes survival is not pretty." That was the only reason she was here. Not love, not choice. Survival. At the hospital that afternoon, she stood beside her father's bed. He was asleep, a pale shadow of the man who used to fix her bike and hum Sinatra songs while cooking. The nurse smiled. "The new payment cleared this morning. The next treatment is scheduled." Clara forced a smile of gratitude. She could not tell them that the payment had come with a wedding ring. Across town, Marcus sat in a boardroom filled with polished shoes and colder smiles. His father's company, now his empire, was under scrutiny. A family-owned corporation demanded appearances. Investors demanded proof of stability. Marriage conveys trust, his legal advisor had told him. It softens your reputation, makes you human. Marcus had never cared about being human. He cared about control. Yet for reasons he could not name, his thoughts kept drifting back to the quiet girl, sitting under the chandelier last night, holding back tears she refused to let him see. When he returned home that night, the lights were dim. Clara was reading on the couch, her posture straight, her eyes tired. He paused for a second in the doorway. She looked up. Their eyes met briefly, no words, only the hum of unspoken distance. "You can use the guest room down the hall," he said. "It is more private." "I am fine here," she replied softly. He hesitated, then nodded once and disappeared into his office. Days blurred into weeks. They shared a house, but not a life. She woke early to prepare his coffee out of habit, not affection. He left before she could say good morning. At night he worked late, the blue glow of his laptop flickering through the glass door. Sometimes, when she walked past his study, she would see him staring out at the skyline, a glass of bourbon in hand, looking like a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. One evening, the housekeeper mentioned a charity gala. "Mr. Hale's company is one of the sponsors," she said cheerfully. "You will attend?" "Yes," Clara blinked. No one had told her about it. Later that night, she found the invitation on the counter, placed beside a black credit card, and a note written in Marcus's sharp handwriting. "Wear something appropriate." That was all. No greeting, no name. Just an order. When the night of the gala came, Clara stood in front of the mirror adjusting the borrowed gown the stylist had delivered hours earlier. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her, elegant, composed but hollow. At the event, flashbulbs burst like fireworks as they entered. Marcus's hand rested loosely at her back, a gesture meant for the cameras, not for her. They smiled, posed, played their parts. Every smile she gave felt rehearsed, every word calculated. But when a reporter joked, "Tell us, Mrs. Hale, was it love or business?" the room erupted in polite laughter. Marcus froze, his jaw tightening. Before he could speak, Clara answered, her voice calm and clear. "Perhaps both," she said. "Love builds trust and business tests it." For a moment the laughter stopped. Even Marcus turned to her, a flicker of surprise breaking through his cool mask. When they returned home that night, neither spoke, but as Clara removed her earrings, she caught his reflection in the mirror. He was watching her, quiet, unreadable. Something shifted in his gaze, something that looked dangerously close to regret. He turned away before she could be sure. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and steady. Inside, two people who shared one name and one address stood in separate rooms, both pretending the distance did not hurt. Neither of them knew it yet, but this fragile arrangement was about to crack. And when it did, the truth buried beneath their signatures would begin to rise. The next few weeks moved like slow rain down a window, quiet, steady, pretending to be harmless. The rules of the contract were simple, but living inside them was not. Clara did her best to keep the peace. She kept her distance, kept her voice polite, and kept her heart from hoping for more. Marcus, true to his word, treated their marriage like business. Every dinner together was short, formal, and silent. She learned that his schedule ran with machine precision work at 6 gym, at 7 meetings until late. He never missed a call, never lost control, but sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, she would catch a glimpse of the man behind the CEO mask, a quiet sadness in his eyes that looked too familiar. One night, Clara was reading on the couch when the phone rang. The sound startled her. No one ever called this line. She answered. "Hale residence." A female voice laughed on the other end. "Oh, you must be the new Mrs. Hale. How does it feel to be his latest contract?" The call ended before Clara could respond. The laughter still echoed in her head. She set the phone down slowly. It should not have hurt, but it did. Later that evening, Marcus came home late from the office. His tie was undone, his eyes heavy. "You did not have to wait up," he said, noticing her on the couch. "I was not waiting," she replied, closing her book. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt thick, almost fragile. Then she asked quietly, "Is it true what they say that you marry for business?" His gaze hardened. "You knew what this was, Clara. Do not start pretending it is something else." "I never pretended," she said, her voice low. "But you did." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He turned and left the room, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. That night, Clara could not sleep. She sat by the window staring at the skyline. Somewhere between the glass towers and the neon lights, she realized she was not angry at him for being cold. She was angry at herself for still caring. The next morning, Marcus woke late, his head aching. He had skipped dinner and gone straight to bed, exhausted from the week. When he stepped into the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee greeted him. Clara was already there, dressed for work, her hair tied neatly back. "You did not have to make that," he said quietly. "I know," she answered. "I did it because I wanted to." He hesitated. Something about her calmness unsettled him. "You are not supposed to work outside the house," he said. She met his gaze. "The contract says nothing about living like a ghost. I found a position at a local art gallery. It is part-time. It helps me breathe." He wanted to argue but stopped. The words died before they reached his lips. For the first time, Marcus realized that control was not the same as peace. Days later, a board meeting ran long and he returned home close to midnight. The penthouse was dark, except for a single light in the living room. Clara had fallen asleep on the couch papers scattered beside her sketches, small paintings, color notes. He picked one up carefully. It was a watercolor of the city at dusk, gentle and alive. Something inside him shifted. She was building something beautiful inside the cage he had given her. Without waking her, he covered her with a blanket and lingered for a moment longer than he should have. He did not understand why the sight of her calm face made his chest feel heavy. In the days that followed, his tone softened without him realizing. He asked about her work. He waited for her in the evenings. She still called him Mr. Hale, but sometimes she smiled when she said it. Then one afternoon he found himself standing outside the small art gallery near downtown. Through the glass window he saw her arranging frames, laughing with another artist. Her eyes were bright in a way he had never seen at home. For the first time, Marcus felt something foreign: jealousy. He stayed there, hidden by the reflection of the streetlights, watching her move gracefully between canvases. She looked free. He had given her everything but that. When he finally turned away, the city noise faded behind him. His own words from that first night echoed back, "You are just a contract." But now, for reasons he could not explain, the sentence no longer sounded true. The gala season arrived again almost 6 months after their contract began. Marcus had grown used to seeing Clara around the house, her quiet presence blending into the rhythm of his days. He told himself it was convenience, someone to keep appearances, someone to make his life look complete, but deep down he knew better. She had become the only calm in his chaotic world. One morning his assistant reminded him about the charity event hosted by Hale Industries. "You and Mrs. Hale are expected to attend together," she said with a polite smile. Marcus simply nodded. "Send her the details." That night, Clara found the same kind of note on the kitchen counter as before, short, cold, written in his sharp handwriting. "Attendance required." No greeting, no warmth, just obligation. She sighed, pressing the paper flat against the marble surface. It was almost funny how something so small could still hurt. When the night came, the ballroom was a garden of light. Cameras flashed, champagne sparkled, and every conversation was about money disguised as charity. Clara entered on Marcus's arm, wearing a soft silver gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Every head turned. She looked effortless, but inside her heart raced. Marcus leaned closer, whispering, "For the camera's sake, smile, Clara. They can smell fear." She forced a small smile. "I am not afraid," she whispered back. "Just tired of pretending." They moved through the crowd like two actors playing a role they no longer believed in. At the table, a group of investors raised their glasses. To the Hales, one man said loudly, "Proof that even the coldest CEO can fall in love." The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. Marcus's hand tensed around his glass. He was ready to cut the joke short, but Clara spoke first. Her voice was steady, almost graceful. "Love and business both demand trust," she said, meeting their eyes one by one, "but business tests it more." The table fell quiet. For a moment, even Marcus forgot to breathe. Then, as the music swelled again, he leaned closer and murmured, "You handled that well." "I have learned from the best," she replied softly. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in months. Under the lights, she did not look like a contract. She looked like someone he did not deserve. Later that evening, after the speeches and the polite applause, the crowd thinned. Marcus found Clara alone on the terrace, her hands resting on the railing as the city glittered below. The air smelled faintly of rain. "You should not be out here alone," he said, stepping closer. She turned, her expression unreadable. "We are always alone, Marcus. Even when we stand together." Something in her tone cut through him. For the first time, he had no answer. He reached into his pocket, taking out the small velvet box that had been meant as a prop for the evening. "The PR team thought it would look good if we renewed our vows publicly," he said, offering a weak smile. "Another illusion." Clara looked at the box, then back at him. "Everything between us is an illusion." The honesty in her voice shook him. "It does not have to be," he said quietly. "We could start over." She gave a small, sad smile. "You would have to tear up the contract first." Before he could respond, the door to the terrace opened, and one of his executives stepped out. "Marcus, the press wants a statement." He hesitated. "Give me a minute." The man nodded but glanced at Clara with curiosity before leaving. The moment was broken. Clara turned back to the city. "You should go," she said. He lingered, his eyes on her profile. "I do not want to," he admitted. She did not turn around. "Then stay. But do not lie." For a long time neither moved. The music drifted from inside, soft and distant. Finally Marcus reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She did not flinch, but her eyes shimmered with something close to tears. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. "I am trying, Clara." She nodded once. "Then try harder." The rest of the night passed like a dream he could not remember. Cameras flashed, hands shook, champagne flowed. But all Marcus could think about was the way her voice had trembled on the terrace, and how every word she said felt like truth he had been running from. When they returned home, she disappeared into her room without a word. Marcus stood in the hallway, the weight of the empty house pressing down on him. For the first time, the silence did not feel peaceful. It felt like punishment. And for the first time, Marcus Hale began to understand that contracts end, but consequences do not. Weeks passed after the gala, and something inside the mansion shifted. The silence between Marcus and Clara was no longer filled with resentment, but with questions neither dared to ask. He had begun noticing things he once ignored, the way she hummed softly while watering the plants, the small notes she left for the housekeeper, the gentle patience in her voice when she spoke to strangers. Those little things haunted him in quiet moments. Clara, on the other hand, had stopped expecting anything. Her life had become a rhythm of simple survival. She still went to the art gallery, still sent her father money, still returned each evening to a home that did not feel like one. But now, every time she saw Marcus, she felt a change, a hesitation in his tone, a shadow of guilt behind his eyes. She did not trust it. One night, as she was sketching in the living room, Marcus appeared at the door. He looked unusually tired, his tie loosened, his voice low. "Do you still paint?" She looked up. "Sometimes. It helps me think." He stepped closer. "What do you think about freedom?" she said simply. Marcus froze. "Freedom from me. From this," she said, gesturing around them. "From pretending." He did not argue. Instead, he sat down across from her, watching her hands move across the paper. Her lines were soft, but confident. "You are good," he said after a moment. She smiled faintly. "You never noticed before." "I was not looking," he admitted. "I am looking now." For the first time, the distance between them did not feel endless. Something fragile and real began to form, unspoken, uncertain, but alive. The next morning, Marcus left early for a board meeting. The company was under pressure from rumors that a merger deal had leaked confidential information. He had no idea that this crisis would soon destroy everything he was starting to rebuild. By the end of that week, headlines flooded the financial news. Insider leak at Hale Industries, confidential documents exposed. Anonymous sources hinted at betrayal from within. The board demanded answers. Marcus demanded blood. That evening he stormed into the penthouse, his expression dark. "Who were you talking to at the gala?" he asked without greeting. Clara blinked, startled. "What are you talking about? Someone from Klein Holdings said you spoke with their representative about my company." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing," she said firmly. "They were talking about your donation. That is all." He slammed a folder onto the table. Inside were printed emails, screenshots from a private server, all traced to her name. "Then explain this," he said coldly. Her eyes widened. "That is not me. I never sent these. They came from your account," he snapped. "You used my last name to enter this family, and now you use it to ruin me." Her voice broke, but she stood her ground. "Marcus, please listen. Someone must have enough." His voice was sharp, final. "The contract is over. Pack your things and get out." For a moment, neither moved. Then Clara stepped back, tears streaming down her face. "You said you were looking at me," she whispered, "but you still cannot see me." She walked away, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his own anger. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his office, the city lights flickering through the rain. The folder still lay open on the desk. He poured a drink, but it did not burn enough to numb him. He tried to focus on the betrayal, the proof, the logic, but all he could hear was her voice. Freedom from this, from pretending. He had given her freedom, but it did not feel like victory. It felt like loss. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline, and somewhere in the dark, the last trace of warmth in his home disappeared with her footsteps. 3 months passed after Clara left, and the penthouse that once felt cold now felt empty in a way Marcus could not stand. The silence no longer protected him. It punished him. Every corner of the house reminded him of her. The coffee mug she used still sat untouched in the cabinet. The small plant she cared for had wilted. Even the air smelled different, like something human had been taken away. He threw himself into work, desperate to drown out the ache. But even there, her absence followed him. Board meetings were tense. The investigation into the data leak continued, and although no new evidence had appeared, the damage was done. Investors had lost trust. For the first time in his career, Marcus Hale looked like a man who could lose everything. One evening, while reviewing old security files with his legal team, Marcus noticed something strange. One of the timestamps in the email chain was off by several hours, registered from a device that did not belong to Clara. "Whose login is that?" he asked sharply. The technician scrolled through the data. "It appears to be from your executive assistant's device, sir. She had temporary access to Mrs. Hale's work account for scheduling during the merger." The room fell silent. Marcus stared at the screen as realization hit. It was not Clara. It had never been her. He dismissed the team immediately, his voice low and unsteady. The moment the door closed, he sank into his chair, the weight of guilt crushing him. He had destroyed the only person who had ever looked at him as more than a title. That night he opened a drawer and found the torn contract, the one she had left behind. Her signature was still there next to his faded but clear. He traced the ink with his thumb. "What have I done?" he whispered. The next morning Marcus drove out of the city. He had one address, an art gallery in a quiet coastal town. It was the place she had once mentioned when she talked about freedom. When he arrived, the building was small but full of light. Through the glass he saw her. Clara stood at the back of the gallery arranging canvases with a group of children. She was smiling. It was not the polite smile she used to wear beside him. It was real, warm, alive. He froze. For the first time in his life, Marcus Hale felt afraid. Not of failure or scandal, but of not being forgiven. When she finally noticed him, the smile faded. The children sensed the tension and quietly stepped aside. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward him, calm but distant. "What are you doing here, Marcus? I needed to see you," he said softly. "I know I have no right, but I found the truth. It was not you. The leak came from someone else. I should have trusted you." Clara's expression did not change. "You found out because it hurt your company, not because it hurt me." Her words hit him like glass. He swallowed hard. "You are right, but I am here because I cannot carry what I did any longer." For a long moment she said nothing. The sound of waves outside filled the silence. Finally she sighed. "I stopped hating you weeks ago. That was the easy part. What I cannot do is forget how easily you believed I could betray you." Marcus nodded slowly. "I do not ask you to forget. I only ask for a chance to make it right." She looked at him, her eyes tired but gentle. "Some things cannot be fixed, Marcus. They can only be understood." He lowered his gaze, unable to speak. When he finally looked up again, she had already turned back toward the children, her laughter soft and distant. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, knowing that for the first time in his life, all the power and money in the world could not buy what he had lost. He left the gallery quietly, the ocean wind following him down the steps, whispering the truth he had tried to avoid. Some contracts end, but love does not fade it, just learns to live without permission. Weeks passed after that brief meeting in the gallery, but Marcus could not move on. Every night he replayed her words in his mind. Some things cannot be fixed, they can only be understood. He finally understood what she meant. He had spent his life building contracts, but love was never something you could negotiate. He began to change quietly, almost without realizing it. At the office, he treated people differently. He listened more, spoke less. His employees noticed that the once cold and demanding CEO now remembered their names, asked about their families, and even took interest in their projects. But no one knew that every act of kindness was a way of speaking to her without words. One morning his assistant entered his office, her expression uneasy. "Mr. Hale, there is something you need to see." She placed a printed report on his desk. It was the final audit on the merger leak. The evidence was undeniable. The betrayal had come from his former executive assistant, the same person he had trusted for years. She had already fled overseas. Marcus closed the folder and leaned back, a hollow laugh escaping his throat. So it really was all for nothing. That evening he drove again to the coast. The sky was painted gold and violet, the air carrying the scent of salt and wet sand. He parked near the gallery but did not go inside. Instead, he stood across the street watching through the window. Clara was closing up for the day. She looked peaceful, happier than he had ever seen her. He wanted to walk in to tell her everything, but something held him back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was love, the kind that finally learned not to demand. He slipped a small envelope through the gallery door before leaving. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no letter, no apology, just the torn pieces of their old contract taped back together, and beneath his signature, 4 handwritten words: "I was wrong, Clara." 2 days later, the envelope reached her desk. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling. When she saw what was inside, she did not cry. Instead, she smiled softly, the kind of smile that comes when an old wound finally stops hurting. That night, she walked along the shore alone, the tide washing over her shoes. She whispered his name once, not with anger, but with peace. Far away in a high-rise office glowing against the night sky, Marcus stood by the window holding a photograph of her painting, the one he had secretly bought from the gallery's charity auction. He looked at it for a long time, his reflection merging with the colors she had painted. For the first time in years, Marcus Hale felt human, and though she was gone, the silence in his heart no longer felt empty. It felt like forgiveness. 6 months later, winter returned to the city. Snow gathered along the glass walls of Hale Industries, muting the noise of the world below. Marcus stood in his office staring at the skyline that once made him feel powerful. Now it only reminded him of how small a man could feel when he lost something that truly mattered. He had rebuilt the company's reputation, settled the scandal, and even launched a new charity fund under Clara's name, the Evans Art Foundation, dedicated to helping underprivileged children study art. It was his way of making amends, though he never told her. The fund's first exhibit was set to open in the spring, and all the proceeds would go to community art programs near the coast where she lived. Every week he received a progress report from the foundation's manager, and every week he caught himself staring at the photographs of smiling children painting under the sunlight. She was often in the background, still volunteering, still radiant. He never reached out. Some part of him believed that love meant letting her live in peace. One evening, as he left a meeting, his assistant handed him an invitation. "It is from the Evans Art Foundation," she said. "They are holding a winter exhibition next week. The board insists you attend as the anonymous founder." Marcus hesitated. His name would not appear anywhere, but he would be there. He decided to go. When he arrived at the small coastal gallery, the smell of fresh paint and pine filled the air. Strings of warm lights ran across the ceiling, and soft music played in the background. The walls were lined with children's artwork, bright, hopeful colors that felt like a heartbeat. Then he saw it. In the center of the room stood a painting larger than the rest, a city skyline at dawn, watercolor and gold, titled Freedom. Beneath the title was a single dedication, "For the one who finally learned to see." Marcus froze. He did not need to ask who had painted it. He turned, and there she was. Clara stood at the far side of the room speaking to one of the children. Her hair was shorter now, her smile quieter but still kind. When she noticed him, their eyes met. Neither spoke at first. The room seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them and the hum of the world outside. "I did not know you would be here," she said softly when he finally approached. "I was invited," he replied. "I did not expect you to be the artist." "You should have," she said. "You taught me what freedom costs." He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you taught me what it means." They stood there for a long moment, two people who had once shared a life built on paper and lies now facing the truth that had survived everything. When the crowd began to clap for the final announcement, Clara turned to him and said gently, "Stay for the closing, Marcus. You might like what you hear." He agreed quietly, not yet knowing that the closing words would change everything he thought was over. When the lights dimmed for the closing ceremony, the room fell into a reverent hush. A small stage had been set up near the back of the gallery, surrounded by the paintings of children from the foundation. The host stepped forward, thanking everyone for attending and praising the anonymous donor who had made the foundation possible. Marcus shifted slightly in the crowd, uncomfortable with the recognition he had never sought. Then Clara walked to the microphone. Her presence commanded quiet without effort. The soft light reflected off her silver earrings, and her calm voice carried easily through the room. 6 months ago she began this gallery. Was just an idea. I wanted a place where art could heal people the way it healed me. What I did not know was that someone else had already made that possible, someone who chose to stay hidden. She paused, her eyes scanning the audience until they found him. The Evans Art Foundation exists today because one person believed that change begins with kindness, not contracts. A ripple of murmurs ran through the room, but Marcus could not move. She knew. Somehow she had found out the truth. Clara continued, her voice steady. Tonight I want to thank that person not for the money but for the lesson that no heart is too cold to learn compassion. She smiled softly. This exhibition is dedicated to him. Applause filled the room. Marcus lowered his head, unable to speak. When it was over, she stepped down from the stage and crossed the floor toward him. For a long moment they stood face to face again, the past heavy between them. You knew, he said quietly. About the foundation. I did, she replied. You never were as invisible as you thought. He exhaled, the tension breaking in his chest. I wanted to give back something you gave me, the chance to feel human again. Clara studied him carefully. You did not owe me anything, Marcus, but you did something better. You learned. He nodded, eyes glistening. I do not know if I deserve forgiveness. She shook her head. Forgiveness is not about deserving. It is about releasing what hurts. A silence followed, gentle and full. The guests began leaving, but neither of them moved. The air smelled of paint, pine, and ocean wind drifting in from the open door. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice almost breaking. If I asked you to start over, not as a contract, not as an arrangement, but as two people, would you consider it? Clara looked at him for a long time. Then she smiled, a quiet, peaceful smile that reminded him of dawn. Marcus' life already gave us a second chance. What we do with it is up to us. He took a slow breath, stepping closer. Then I want to do it right this time. She did not answer in words. Instead, she reached for his hand. The gesture was simple but powerful, a bridge between who they had been and who they could still become. Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes catching in her hair. The last guests drifted out into the cold, leaving them alone in the warm light of the gallery. Marcus looked around at the walls covered in color and life, the proof that something beautiful could grow from ruin. You once said you dreamed of freedom, he murmured. What does it feel like now? Clara squeezed his hand gently. Like forgiveness, she said. He smiled, the first genuine smile in years. Together they walked toward the door, their shadows merging against the light, leaving behind a world of signatures and contracts for something real at last. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet, patient, endless. And for the first time, Marcus Hale did not feel trapped by the world he had built. He felt free because love, once broken, had found its way home.